your life is meant to be in seasons. So if your life was all, sunshine and rainbows and your life was always happy and joyful all the time, your faith would be very, very shallow. That God might be tearing down your plans so that they don't tear you down. If you go through these seasons that are so heartbreaking, so devastating, whenever you get to the other side and you start having these seasons of laughter, these seasons of dancing, these seasons of happiness, it'll help you to just love God so much more and appreciate Him for His goodness so much more. Welcome into another episode of the GC Show. I hope y'all are doing absolutely amazing. And man, we're finally back here in the chair. It feels like a whole 3 weeks since we've been back in the chair, man. It feels like forever. You see, we're back here in the chair today, and today we are talking about the seasons of life. Now you might say, well, Gavin, what does winter, spring, summer, and fall have to do with answering the call? Well, we're not talking about those type of seasons today. We're talking about the spiritual seasons that we all go through in life. You see, we get to points in our life where we say, God, my life wasn't supposed to be going this way. I thought it was supposed to be going a little better, or the way I planned it out, or maybe just go a little bit differently than what I was thinking. But you see, there's a reason for all of it. We go through seasons that are good, like the harvesting seasons, and the seasons that are maybe more difficult, like the planting seasons, where God is shaping you exactly into who you need to be. And today we are going to be breaking it all down. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Our passage today comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. I'm going to read through all 8 verses, but for this episode specifically, we're just going to be breaking down verses 1 through 4. And then next week's episode, we'll be breaking down verses 5 through 8. So there's your little sign to tune into next week's episode. But Ecclesiastes chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. We're going to break this down verse by verse. So as we look back at verse 1, where the Bible says, for everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven. You see, your life is meant to be in seasons. And that may sound so simple, but yet I think it's so often that we forget that as we go through our life and we start comparing. You see, when you go on social media and you start looking at other people's lives and you think, wow, they have it all together, man. What am I doing with my life? You see, oftentimes when that happens is you're comparing what you may be going through as a preparation season in your life to someone else's harvesting season. Just because someone else's life may look better than you right now does not mean that you're behind, because everyone is on a different race, a different track in life. And you see, I want you to think about it this way. If you were to have 2 farmers and one was, planting seeds that were eventually going to grow up and the other one was harvesting the crops, are those 2 things even comparable? And the answer is no. You see, and the same thing goes for your life as well. Is you may be looking at your life and thinking that it's not super great, that you don't have it all together, and you're looking at other people out here thinking, wow, their life looks so perfect. But they may be in a winning season while you may be in a preparation season right now. So I want you to always remember that. And before you start comparing, just remember where you're at right now and that God has you right in that spot for a reason. If we look back at verse 2, the Bible says, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest. I want to hone in specifically on the second part of that verse, a time to plant and a time to harvest. You see, just like watering a real plant, you have to do the necessary, ordinary things. You see, if you were to plant a tree, for example, and then you just watered it whenever you felt like it, but didn't water it necessarily every single day, you think that tree would grow to its full potential? I don't think so. You see, so what this looks like in the life of a Christian to consistently, water that plant over time is continually putting God first in your life, getting in the Word, praying, finding ways just every single day to continue to deepen and grow in your relationship with Christ. And you see, as you go throughout this and you do these little things, these little disciplines every day to continue to build your relationship with Christ, it often feels slow because you're not seeing results in life. But what I want to remind you of is the planting season, it may feel long and it may feel boring because you're doing the little things and not seeing results, but you will get to that harvesting season someday. And another thing I want to mention about the harvest is how, as humans, it's a natural tendency to want to be in those winning seasons. And everyone wants to have those harvesting seasons, the great seasons in life. But over-harvesting is actually bad. You see, the physical process of, harvesting, let's just say wheat, for example, whenever you over-harvest, the natural resources are removed faster than those, natural resources can regenerate, meaning that it's bad for the soil and, that ground becomes unfertile over time to be able to grow plants. So if you're rushing through these planting seasons in your life, you may be missing what God is trying to do in your life and, skipping over things that God is trying to shape in you and transform you into you that he could use later on in your life. But if you're just skipping over that planting season, trying to get to the harvesting season, you could miss those things that actually down the road could end up being bad for you. And one of the sayings I just think is so cool is how Usain Bolt talks about how he trained for 4 years to run 9 seconds. And it's just another reminder that goes to show that the planting season is often a lot longer than the harvesting season. And if Usain Bolt in that planting season, in that training season, just took off for an extended period of time, he would miss out on the training that he needed to be able to run as fast as he could within those 9 seconds. And you see, just like in your life as well, right? If you're going to pull fruit from a tree and you pull it before it's ripe, then the fruit's not good, and then all of a sudden it's a waste of a fruit, right? You have to endure the planting season, even though it's hard, even though it's difficult, even though you have to be so patient. The lessons that you learn in the planting season are going to be so worth it, and you're going to be able to take those things throughout the rest of your life. So my friend, be sure to not rush that preparation and that planting season. If we look back at verse 3, the Bible says, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up. You see, what we can ultimately get from this, from the second part of this verse specifically, is that God tears down before he builds up. An example I like to think of for this, and it actually fits perfectly, is the team that is right behind me all over the wall, the St. Louis Cardinals. You see, they are currently going through a season right now where, man, it is very difficult because they're having to trade away a lot of their good players, and they are going through a full rebuild, a rebuild that has been needed for a long time. I could go on and on about this rebuild. But you see, for the Cardinals, if they were to just buy in every single year with where they're at right now, they wouldn't have the money to be able to do that, and they wouldn't be able to build a championship caliber team, right? You have to rebuild. You have to trade away your better players so you can get prospects in return. You have to rebuild the team, develop the younger players so that you can build a championship caliber roster. And the same thing goes for your life as well, is God might bring you out of the spotlight. He might bring you to a point in your life where he's trying to rebuild you. He's trying to shape you into a brand new person so that when you go into situations in the future later in life, you are exactly who you need to be that God has shaped you into. And another thing I think it's important to point out here, how it says a time to tear down and a time to build up, is that God might be tearing down your plans so that they don't tear you down. Whenever I hear tear down, my mind immediately goes to the show Fixer Upper. You guys may have seen it before. These people, they go into these houses and they tear out all these things and they rebuild the house and make it look so cool. And, hypothetically, let's just say the Fixer Upper people, they went into this house and they went to, I don't know, let's just say the living room. And there was this wall in there. They're like, hey, we should maybe tear out this wall. But then the homeowners, they're like, whoa, this wall's been up in this house for 19 years. We can't tear down this wall. But then the Fixer Upper people were like, no, we're going to do this anyway. We're going to tear out this wall. And then it gets done. The project gets done. And the homeowner's like, man, why didn't we tear down that wall earlier? Because it looks so much better without that wall in the house. You see, and the same thing goes here, is that in our life we may be thinking, oh, this way would be so good, God. Why don't you just let me have this? But then God begins to do something different in your life that maybe you didn't expect that ends up turning out better in the end. So if you are going through this tough season in your life where it feels like God is just tearing you down, he's trying to rebuild you, and you're saying, man, I thought this was going to be a winning season in my life. Just know that God might be tearing something out in your life right now because he's going to rebuild it so much better than what you could have ever imagined. If we look back at verse 4, the Bible says, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance. You see, I think as human tendency, we all want those laughing and dancing seasons, but we're going to have to go through those seasons of crying and those seasons of grieving. But what we ultimately can know is that the preparation seasons shape emotional and spiritual depth. You see, the difficult seasons that we go through in our life, right? These seasons of crying and these seasons of grieving, those seasons are what deepen your spiritual maturity. You see, these seasons often lead to deeper prayer. They lead to honest questions with God, and they may even lead to wrestling with God. And this last part specifically, this wrestling with God, can lead to two different options. One, whenever you're wrestling with God, it may completely turn you away from God as a whole. You're saying, man, God, why did this happen in my life? This is all your fault. But the other option, and the option that I would hope you would take whenever you're going through these hard seasons in your life, is that you would wrestle with God and ask these true, honest questions, saying like, God, why does this have to happen? But saying, God, I still trust you even through the struggle. Because that will allow you to grow like spiritually more mature and allow you to just build your relationship so much stronger with God. And these seasons of heartbreak, man, I tell you, they make such a powerful, powerful testimony. And the hard things you go through are going to be the things that God can use to help other people relate with you. You see, if you're going into church and someone's speaking and, they got a perfect looking fit on and they're talking so eloquently and perfectly, and you look at them and think, wow, this person's perfect. It's going to be very hard to relate with them if you're someone who's sitting down listening and you're like, man, I'm so broken on the inside, and you feel like you're losing a little bit of hope. But if someone is up there speaking, telling about their personal testimony, talking about their struggle and how it allowed them to draw closer to God, it could be something that's very similar that someone else is struggling with. And your testimony, your stories of heartbreak and how that drew you closer to God is what God is going to use to make an impact in other people's lives through your testimony. So I want to remind you of that, is that one, your testimony is so powerful, and two, these seasons of heartbreak are not just so that you can grow closer to God, but so that other people can grow closer to God as well through your story. And another thing about verse 4, how it says, a time to laugh and a time to dance. If your life was all, sunshine and rainbows, and your life was always happy and joyful all the time, your faith would be very, very shallow. An example I like to think of when it comes to this is sports. I'm going to bring up sports anytime I can. If my teams, the St. Louis Cardinals, the St. Louis Blues, the Jags, if they were winning championships every single year, do you think those championships would mean as much? Probably not. You see, when championships mean so much is whenever your team has gone through these heartbreaking, devastating moments year after year after year, and then finally they get over the hump and win a championship. And when that happens, it just means so much. I like to think of with my teams, like the Cardinals, the run in 21, the run in 22, the Blues in 2025, and then the Jags in 2025, I guess 2026 as well. Very devastating ends to those runs. But man, those heartbreaking moments, those heartbreaking losses have made me so much more of a fan of those teams, knowing that the wins are going to mean so much someday. And the same thing can go with your relationship as Christ as well. Is if you go through these seasons that are so heartbreaking, so devastating, whenever you get to the other side and you start having these seasons of laughter, these seasons of dancing, these seasons of happiness, it'll help you to just love God so much more and appreciate Him for His goodness so much more. So as we get near the end of this week's episode, what I want to leave you with is that for everything, there is a season. And seasons are all a part of God's design. Seasons change, but God's purpose doesn't. The preparation seasons are temporary, but what God builds in you through the waiting, through the preparation season, those things last a lifetime. And that is the lesson for today. Thank you guys for tuning into this week's episode. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, be sure to let me know down below. And if you know of anyone who'd be interested in hearing this episode, I'd encourage you to share with them, because the goal of the GC show is to bring them all to heaven, point even just one more person toward Christ. And if you specifically enjoyed this episode and you're watching on YouTube, I'd encourage you to check out the episode that's going to be popping up on the screen right over here, because I believe that it is for you. And like I mentioned earlier, next week's episode is going to be part 2, talking about the seasons of life. So stay tuned for that. But for now, thank you guys for listening. I'll see you next week. Be great today, and praise God.